You step outside, and there they are again, watering the lawn, staring just a second too long, appearing every time you move, as if your routine is part of theirs. It might feel like coincidence, but your instincts whisper otherwise. In a world filled with cameras, smart devices, and silent watchers, surveillance doesn't always come with a warning. Sometimes it hides behind a smile and a neighborly wave. Today, we're going to uncover 5 disturbing signs that your neighbor may not just be watching, they may be tracking. This is not paranoia. It's a strategic awareness. Through the lens of Stoic philosophy, you'll learn how to stay calm under pressure, protect your energy, and respond with quiet strength, not fear. Let this be your reminder. A strong mind sees clearly, prepares silently, and acts with purpose. The wise man is not shaken by shadows. He sharpens his senses and stands ready. 1. Their technology is focused on you. In this age, surveillance doesn't wear a uniform. It hides in plain sight in doorbell cameras, motion sensors, drone flyovers, and phones lifted at just the right angle. And while technology offers safety, it can also be twisted into a tool of control. You may notice small things at first. A camera angled slightly toward your driveway instead of their own. A light blinking every time you walk outside. A device in the window that seems to shift its direction depending on where you stand. But these aren't isolated events. Over time, they form a pattern. One that says, "This, you are being watched." Not for protection, but for power. And that's when it becomes something deeper than curiosity. It becomes intrusion. The Stoics taught that no man should allow the external world to govern his internal state. But they also taught that clarity begins with recognition. When your neighbor's devices are consistently aimed at you, your property, your routines, your moments of solitude, you must understand what's happening. This is not casual observation. This is strategic monitoring. And with it comes a quiet form of psychological warfare. Because it's not just your movements they are following. It's your comfort they are challenging. Your mind they are trying to disrupt. The goal is subtle control to make you second-guess your actions. To make you feel surrounded without confrontation. To make you perform under pressure without ever being told you're under a lens. Do not underestimate what this does to your peace. It chips away at the mental silence that every man needs to think clearly, to breathe fully, and to move freely in his own domain. But this is where the Stoic path becomes vital. You do not meet this intrusion with panic. You meet it with presence, with strategy. You begin to document, not for revenge, but for awareness. You study the placement of their tools, the direction of their lenses, the times they activate. You don't make noise. You don't raise alarm. You gather information with the same discipline a general uses to survey a battlefield. And then you adjust, shift your routines, reinforce your privacy, install your own barriers, if needed not to fight, but to reassert control over what is yours, not with drama, but with discipline, because every Stoic knows the man who cannot be shaken by being watched is the man who cannot be owned. You do not feed their need for reaction. You become unreadable, calm, deliberate, and when you act, if you choose to escalate the matter, it will not be from emotion, but from certainty, whether that means legal action, new barriers, or quiet redirection. It will come from a place of strength. Understand, this technology is not neutral in the hands of the insecure. It becomes a weapon of control. But your greatest weapon is not your voice. It is your silence, your clarity, your ability to remain unmoved. The wise man sees the eyes watching him and continues his path without flinching, because his power is internal. And no camera, no drone, no sensor can penetrate the fortress of a man who knows exactly who he is, what he stands for, and what lines will never be crossed. That is not just defense. That is command. 2. They know private details they shouldn't. It starts as a strange moment, a passing comment that doesn't sit right. Maybe they mention your plans before you ever spoke them aloud. Maybe they ask about someone who visited your home, someone they had no way of seeing. Or perhaps they reference something that happened behind closed doors, a discussion, a decisión, or a conflict that never left your walls. You pause. You search for an explanation. Was it a coincidence? Did someone talk? But as the incidents begin to stack, the realization cuts through the uncertainty. They are not guessing. They are not informed through casual talk. They are listening, and they are collecting pieces of your private life without your consent, without your knowledge, and without your permission. This is where the invasion becomes personal, not just surveillance of where you go, but of who you are, your words, your decisions, your internal world. This is no longer about watching from afar. This is a quiet intrusion, psychological and intimate. And make no mistake, this form of attention is not passive. It is deliberate. It requires effort. It requires planning, which means you are dealing with someone who has stepped far beyond the boundaries of respect. The Stoics warned us some men act without reason, driven by envy, control, or compulsion. And the wise man must prepare for this without fear, but with precision, because the moment someone breaches your silence, you must reclaim it not through rage, but through strategy. Start with your environment. Inspect it not as a victim, but as a sentry. Look at what is open. What can be overheard? Are there vents, thin walls, smart devices with microphones, or shared networks that make your world too accessible? Is someone within your circle repeating your words to outsiders? Are digital devices, phones, speakers, computers left always on, always listening? The modern world is not built for privacy. It is built for exposure. But a disciplined man can change that. Disable what is unnecessary. Encrypt what matters. Speak only in spaces where your voice belongs to you. Guard your information not with fear, but with intelligence. And next, observe their behavior. Is their knowledge growing in detail? Are they waiting for reactions when they reveal what they know? Are they testing boundaries to see how far they can push? If so, understand this. They are not just listening. They are playing a slow game of manipulation. And the only way to win is not to play. You withdraw emotionally. You tighten your words. You speak less. You reveal nothing. And when you do speak, you do so with the awareness that ears are near, that every word is a tool, that every silence is a message. You turn their obsession into your signal, a signal to become more disciplined, more self-controlled, more focused. Because in this, the Stoic finds power. You cannot stop every act of eavesdropping, but you can become impenetrable. When your actions are deliberate, your words chosen, and your energy preserved. The one watching you gains nothing. Their need to know becomes starvation. Their strategy collapses against your silence. This is not just defense. It is domination without aggression. And over time, it changes the game entirely. Because the man who knows he's being studied and still remains unmoved is untouchable. His life becomes his fortress. His mind becomes his shield. And his discipline becomes the wall no intruder can climb. Let them know details. Let them play with scraps, because they will never hold the whole of you. The Stoic man does not need to hide. He needs only to remain sovereign. And that sovereignty begins the moment you reclaim your mind, protect your space, and move with intention, unbothered, unreadable, unshaken. That is the power they can never imitate. That is the silence they can never steal. 3. They appear every time you leave your house. In the beginning, it feels like nothing. A glance, a nod, a neighbor who just happens to be around. You step onto your porch, they're already outside. You walk to your car and suddenly, their front door opens. You take the trash out and they emerge from behind the hedge with a broom or a leash or a half-hearted excuse. At first, it's easy to dismiss. People have routines. People have timing. But over time, you begin to feel the pattern. The timing is too perfect. The excuse is too thin. And a quiet tension settles into your awareness. Not fear, something sharper, something clearer. Your instinct speaks, and you begin to listen. Because this is no longer coincidence, this is intention. And where there is intention, there is strategy. You are being watched, not by a stranger, but by someone within your perimeter, someone who blends in under the banner of neighborliness, yet violates the boundary of your peace. And that is what makes this threat so deceptive. It hides in plain sight. Surveillance no longer requires high-tech tools or obvious confrontation. It starts with presence, repetition, the calculated use of time and space to let you know you are never alone. The Stoics knew this kind of warfare well. They understood that most battles are not physical. They are psychological, carried out not with weapons, but with presence, with timing, with the slow erosion of peace, and they trained for it not by fighting shadows, but by mastering their reaction. They built an inner fortress, one that could not be breached by noise, by stares, or by the manipulations of others. The Stoic man does not live in denial. He does not tell himself it's all in his head. He sees, he confirms, he responds calmly, strategically, and without announcing his next move. When someone is always there, waiting without reason, without real purpose, you must understand what's happening. They are not just watching your steps. They are trying to influence them, to shape how you move, to condition your response, to see if you will bend under pressure. But you don't bend. You observe. You collect data. You shift your patterns subtly, invisibly. You become unpredictable. You leave them guessing. Because unpredictability is power, and silence is defense. You do not confront too early. You do not warn. You prepare. Fortify your routines. Consider what they know and what they are trying to learn. Ask why. What do they gain from this constant proximity? Is it control? Is it curiosity turned pathological? Is it envy? Or is it something deeper, an attempt to impose fear by pretending to be harmless? Whatever the motive, your duty is not to explain it. Your duty is to remain unbroken, to protect your time, your energy, and your peace. Remember, your home is your sanctuary, And when someone begins to intrude mentally, emotionally, physically, they are trespassing, not through walls or fences, but through your sense of safety, and that's where your defense begins. Not in violence, not in noise, but in quiet, deliberate strength. The Stoic does not react because others want him to. He responds when he chooses, and how he chooses. His life is not a performance. It is a fortress, and every step he takes, every action, every decision is rooted in awareness. So when that neighbor appears again on cue, like a shadow that refuses to leave, don't panic. Don't show your hand. Simply stand in your center, controlled, unmoved. Let them observe. Let them wonder. Because the man who does not flinch when watched is the man they cannot shake. And that is where the power truly lies. 4. Their behavior escalates into obsession. What began as subtle patterns, quiet presence, and passive watching now begins to take on a more aggressive shape. Their involvement becomes more frequent, more intense, and unmistakably personal. You notice they are always there, always watching, always appearing, always finding new ways to stay connected to your movements. It's no longer just about being nearby. Now, they are showing up in places they shouldn't be. They're asking questions they have no right to ask. They are inserting themselves into your path, your schedule, your environment. Without invitation and without boundaries, they create excuses to linger. They hover when you speak to others. They appear when you open your door. And their gaze is no longer passing. It is fixed, intentional, possessive. You begin to feel that your very existence is being monitored not out of interest, but out of fixation. This is the final and most dangerous sign, because it is here that their behavior crosses from passive threat to active compulsion. Obsession is not about affection or concern. It is about control. It is about ownership. It is the internal weakness of someone who sees your autonomy as a challenge to their fragile sense of self. They are no longer content to observe from a distance. They want to influence, to invade, to make you acknowledge them, respond to them, react to them. They want your energy, your attention, your submission, and in this moment, you must do what the weak cannot: cut the line completely. The Stoics taught us that obsession is a sickness of the mind, a fire that feeds on reaction, and the only way to extinguish it is to deprive it of fuel. You must remove your attention, your emotion, your availability, not in anger, but in complete, unshakable silence. You do not confront an obsessed mind directly. You fortify your world so completely that their presence loses all effect. You become invisible not by hiding, but by making yourself mentally and emotionally unreachable. You deny them what they crave most, your reaction. You offer nothing but absence, because the man who does not react cannot be manipulated. He cannot be fed. He becomes untouchable. This is the moment to take decisive action, not out of fear, but out of sovereignty. Document every interaction. Speak with professionals if needed: law enforcement, legal counsel, security experts. But do so from a place of calm control. Make your steps legal, strategic, and grounded. Set boundaries, and enforce them with firmness, not with drama, but with discipline. If the line must be drawn, draw it so clearly that it can never be crossed again, because obsession will not stop on its own. It grows in silence, in access, in permission, And the moment you remove those things, it begins to collapse under its own weight. Understand this. Your peace is not negotiable. Your home is not a stage. Your life is not available for the entertainment of others. You are a man who commands his environment, who guards his space, who answers to no one's fixation but lives by the order of his own principles. The Stoic does not allow madness to creep into his world. He sees it early. He names it. He shuts the door, not with noise but with finality. If their behavior escalates into obsession, let your response become the boundary that ends it. Quiet, strong, absolute. You are not here to play mind games. You are here to live with clarity, intention, and self-mastery. And if someone threatens that, if they move beyond watching and begin trying to mold your world, you respond not with fear, but with unbreakable resolve. Let them burn in their need for attention. You will rise above it, untouched, because your mind is trained, your discipline is steady, and your presence is no longer accessible to those who refuse to respect it. That is the final lesson. That is what separates the observed from the observer. That is what makes you unshakable. 5. There's physical evidence around your property. In the beginning, it's barely noticeable. A misplaced object, a shift in the soil near your window, a scuff mark on your back door. Maybe it's something small like an unfamiliar footprint on the walkway, or the subtle impression of someone having leaned on your car while you were asleep. You write it off once, maybe even twice, but then it happens again. You find a cigarette butt near your porch, and no one in your home smokes. You see a snapped branch near the fence line where no one walks. The security light flickers on at odd hours, even when no one's supposed to be outside. And now, it's no longer just suspicion, it's confirmation. Someone has been too close, and they've left behind the trace of their presence. This is not imagination. This is not coincidence. This is physical intrusion with intent. An unspoken message. I was here. I can be close to you. And you didn't even notice. But now you notice, and that changes everything. The Stoic mind does not flinch in the face of threat. It acknowledges reality, absorbs it with clarity, and prepares its response with calm intensity. You are no longer dealing with mere surveillance. You are dealing with a calculated erosion of safety. When someone leaves evidence on your property, it is a form of psychological warfare. They want to invade your space without confrontation. They want to inject doubt, vulnerability, and unease into your home, not through force but through presence. Silent, repetitive, strategic. This is where most people make a mistake. They panic, they confront, they explode. But that is what the intruder wants. They want your emotional reaction. They want you to act without thinking, because that's when you become predictable. But the Stoic man does not fall for this trap. He does not shout into the void. He does not demand apologies from shadows. He simply acts with purpose. He reinforces his borders not just physically, but psychologically. He sets up cameras, not to catch, but to confirm. He documents every detail, time, date, evidence. He creates a file not because he is afraid, but because he is precise. You do not need to tell them you've seen the evidence. You let your preparation speak for you. Lights that now activate instantly, locks that click with precision, security signs placed without comment, and above all, your demeanor calm, unreadable, unwavering. Because when a man is watched and still does not flinch, he becomes something that cannot be dominated. He becomes a wall that listens and responds only when necessary. This is how the Stoic navigates threat, not by escalating, but by elevating, not by reacting, but by rising above it with a strategy that does not bend to pressure. Remember this, your home is not just where you sleep, it is where your soul finds rest. And when someone threatens that rest, your duty is not to panic, but to protect, not out of fear, but out of principle. The physical evidence they leave is not just proof of intrusion, it is an opportunity, a signal, a turning point, one that allows you to reclaim control, reassert presence, and show without a single word that you are not the kind of man who gets pushed back into silence. You are the man who watches the watchers, the man who sees every move and responds with discipline. You do not chase ghosts, you expose patterns. You do not scream into the night, you turn on the light and let them know, silently, that their game is over. That is not just power. That is command. That is the cold, steady strength of a man who has trained his mind to remain unshaken, even as others try to shake the ground beneath his feet. That is Stoicism. That is resilience. That is you. If you recognize even one of these signs, do not ignore it. Awareness is your first defense, but action must follow. In a world where silence is often broken by eyes that watch too closely, and boundaries are tested by those who confuse proximity with power, you must become your own guardian. The Stoic man does not live in fear, but he also does not live blind. He reads the signs, he studies the patterns, and then he adapts, not with noise, but with precision. You are not here to explain yourself. You are not here to react to obsession, to manipulation, or to control disguised as concern. You are here to stand unshaken, focused, and free. Strength is not about confrontation. It is about command. It is about knowing what is yours and refusing to let anyone take it. Not your peace, not your time, not your space. And when someone crosses the line, you don't flinch. You don't beg. You don't negotiate with pressure. You respond with boundaries, with structure, with silence forged from inner strength. You walk away from chaos, not because you are weak, but because you are untouchable. That is the power of calm discipline. That is the spirit of strategic defense. And that is the essence of the Stoic path. Clarity over confusion, action over anxiety, and mastery over every shadow that tries to creep in. Stay sharp, stay grounded, and above all, stay sovereign.